My name is Ryan Satkoviak. It is March 3rd. We are 1 week closer to spring practice, 1 week closer to late sunsets. Apparently, we are not any closer to spring, though, Clinton. Sir, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, dude. I'm debuting my new camera that I had for last week's episode that I forgot to put on. Clinton is no longer in 720p, folks. He is full 1080. So this beautiful smile and these white teeth, you can see clearly now. And my fresh haircut, fresh beard fade, we got it rocking. Ryan, I went to a barber for the first time in probably 15 plus years on Saturday. Leah cuts my hair and has pretty much the whole entire time we've been together. So I don't consider like Great Clips a barber. I went to a traditional barber local to where I live, and it was pretty cool. Dude was awesome. He had a deer hanging in there, an American flag coming down. Felt like I was back in the good old PC, which I guess technically I still am. But it was a good time, dude. It was fun. How have you been in this past week?
Dude, what is a PC?
I don't want to announce where I used to live in case somebody's hunting me down on this podcast. I'll tell you off air.
Where you used to live?
Yeah, it's the county.
Oh,
The abbreviations.
I thought you were talking about Port Clinton for some reason. I'm like, what the hell is your association with
I
Port
do
Clinton?
like Port Clinton.
I've never been to Port Clinton.
It's nice. Ryan, how have you been in the week that I haven't seen since I've seen you?
Oh, just hanging in there, man. It's life doesn't stop going on. Good times. I'm tired.
Hey, we're getting closer to March Madness, and you said we're 1 week closer. We are exactly, let me count my numbers, 3 months from my birthday, and I will be 33. 3 months today for the date.
I forget how old I am half the time, so good on you for remembering that.
Well, you're 33. You should know you're, 6 months older than me?
Yeah, I got to do the math, though. It is still very difficult for me to conceptualize that we are in the year 2025.
If there's anything anyone has learned from us in the past 11 months of podcasting is that Ryan can't do math.
I cannot do math. I can't even do basic, double digit plus double digit math anymore without severely questioning myself. We're trying to finally get our fireplace mantle installed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to measure that out today. And it was 156 inches. I'm like, okay, that's a lot of inches. The largest one they have is 80, but I can't get two 80s. How am I going to, maybe I get two, and then I'm trying to do math, and it was just bad. I had to use my calculator. It was
How many inches again?
156.
Damn, I don't count past 6. That's the best I got.
You got 6 inches? Good for you.
As Adam likes to say, just basic white male over here.
I saw, it was like someone Sharpied on a tape measure. It was 1 inch, 3 inches, and the meme was, how do you erase permanent marker? Oh, brother.
That's great.
Okay.
That's great.
All right. What are we talking about today?
All right. Well, I got to do my job, right?
Oh,
hey
yeah,
guys,
since
I do it now, since you guys are tuning in live with us tonight on Twitter, be sure to give us a follow on Instagram and Twitter at ITPCFB. Don't forget to check us out on the YouTube, where we have less of them right now because we're only doing once a week, but we have shorts and our videos and live feeds. We'll have some shorter videos too, 3 to 5 minute videos you can check out if you don't want to see the whole episode. But check us out and give us a follow on YouTube, ITPCFB in the search bar. And don't forget, if you like the audio version only or you just want to check out both, you can find us on your preferred podcast platform, be Spotify, Amazon, Apple, wherever you'd like to listen to our beautiful voices as we wrong word, take you through this off season. It's been a long day. I've had too much caffeine. But we are live again, guys. Thank you again for joining us. Tonight, we are doing a little coaching carousel, talking about some of the coaching changes that have happened in the Big Ten plus Notre Dame. And shockingly for poor Ryan here, BG's coach taking off for the Philadelphia Eagles last week, and a late notice on that one. How do you feel? Let's get your thoughts on that one real quick, Ryan.
I mean, that's kind of the thanks, I guess, type of thing. I mean, it's a shitty situation having to replace your coach in March when you're Bowling Green and you have no money. Like everyone's got their job, everyone's in spring practice. Like maybe you like you're basically like what? Down to position coaches or getting someone else from the NFL or something like that. Like your options are limited. And I mean, we're already talking. I mean, at least their newish athletic director, I don't know how long he's been there for, isn't a complete egghead, but the last two athletic directors they've had, Clinton, I shit you not, might be two of the dumbest people who've ever worked in college sports. Did you ever hear the lore about how they replaced Dino Babers?
Nope.
Their athletic director Googled best offenses in college football, and it was like, I don't remember if it was, that might have been Mahomes at Texas Tech. Because he saw Texas Tech and he's like, I'm going to get whatever assistant I can from that staff, which is how he ended up with, I think his name was Mike Jinks, who was like an associate head coach and a running backs coach or a wide receivers coach, maybe had no coordinator experience, no head coaching experience. And they proceeded to suck ass for 3 years before they fired him. And yeah, they've been kind of just average since. I think, I don't know if I've ever repeated these words on this podcast before, if when it was one of the days that we did with 3 Tech, but when I was in my first semester at the BG News, a wise man told me, if you're at a MAC school for longer than 5 years, that is literally the purgatory you do not want to be in as a program, because it means you're not good enough for your coach to get hired away, but you're not bad enough to fire him and start over. And that's kind of where Bowling Green has been with Scott Loeffler. Like, he's done some good. I mean, he inherited, like, it was a bad situation. It was not a good situation. And this is a program that, like, not just like football in general, but Bowling Green has just had issues financially for as long as dating back to when I was an undergrad there. Like, the year before I showed up, they tried to get rid of the hockey team, which is the only program at that school that's capable of winning a national title in any given year. Like, full stop. They're never going to compete for one in football. They will never compete for one in basketball. Maybe in some of the smaller sports, but like, you're not going to do it in baseball or softball. Swimming, maybe. I don't know if their swim team's any good. Gymnastics, not a clue. Like, the fact that you almost got rid of your only chance at winning a national title because you couldn't balance your budget, insane. A couple years ago, they got rid of their baseball team, and then alumni came in and donated to revive it, basically. So it's not a job that pays great. It's like, we've definitely talked about how, like, the MAC is the worst conference to be a coach in right now, because
Talked about when Tim Alvin left for Charlotte.
there's nothing, like, there's no differentiator between any of these programs. Like, they're all the same. I mean, they're not the same, but like, they're all basically the same. Like, you're in middle America, you have decent sized campuses, decent sized student populations, but it's not like a big, large school or anything like that. And I mean, if you're Bowling Green, you're 20 miles down the road from Toledo, a program that's had long-term success in the MAC, has a really good coach, has had a good history of coaches. Not that BG hasn't, but I mean, it's been since Dave Clawson that anyone's left Bowling Green and had success elsewhere as a head coach. Like, it's not, you can't even sit here and say it's a great stepping stone job. So it's a tough situation. I'm sure that I think Scott Loeffler was, I don't know if he was polarizing. Maybe that's not the right word to phrase it, but I think a lot of people around town were happy with how he revived that program from where it was, mostly because he's reversed the rivalry against Toledo. I think they've won like 2 of the last 3 or 3 of the last 4 years against them. And that's a big deal for BG, right? Like, it's not on the level of Michigan, Ohio State, but like, that's one of the only things that matters in your season, because it's not like you have a national title waiting for you at the end of the season. And more often than not, they haven't been making MAC title games. They had a chance this year and kind of blew it against Miami at the end. But I mean, they've just been kind of in this pattern where they've gotten a little bit better each year, but they never really got past that 500 mark. So maybe change is good. Maybe change is going to be bad, but I don't know.
You just have a storied history, though. You had what? Urban Meyer and Jason Campbell?
What? Jason
I
Campbell?
said Jason Campbell. Matt Campbell. I'm sorry.
Matt Campbell was Toledo, bud.
Toledo. Okay. I knew
Yes.
I was off. Well, I had Toledo on the brain because poor Jason Campbell has been there with that purgatory you talk about, right? How long has he been with Toledo now?
I think he replaced Matt Campbell.
So he's not going anywhere. We've seen the struggle with that in the past few years.
Well, no, like, look at I don't think we envisioned talking about the MAC this much today, but like, I mean, Miami has been one of the most successful MAC programs of the last
Mhm.
decade, and Chuck Martin hasn't been able to get a job anywhere.
Yep.
Who's the last MAC head coach that's like left for a Power Five job?
God, I don't know.
Frickin' Tim Albin just won the MAC and he went to Charlotte.
Yeah. Yep. And before that, Solich retired.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he came from Nebraska, but he
It,
wasn't head coach there.
no, he got fired.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. It's a tough spot to be in. I was certainly bummed as an OU alum and fan to lose Tim Albin, but it's I assume something similar to what BG may have to do, especially given the time crunch you guys are in. But OU just promoted from within because it's not like the Bobcats are the hottest commodity of jobs where you want to go get yourself started. Like Brian Hartline is not going to come down from Columbus to give up an OC job to be head coach at OU and make $70,000 a year.
Well, no, and
Like,
like the way that like coordinator salaries have exploded the last 5 years or so, you're gonna make more as a Power Five coordinator at like Purdue than you will as a head coach in the MAC.
absolutely. And at this point, why even take on the stress of the head coach? Just be the coordinator. Call
Well, and
plays, do your recruiting, and not have to handle all the CEO stress that the head coach does.
well, and I think that's part of it too, is with how college football has changed from a financial perspective the last 5 years and how roster management has changed. I think we're at a point where it's almost more beneficial to be a coordinator at a like mid to high level power four job where like you see what that looks like behind the scenes and you have like not that firsthand experience dealing with it or leading it or delegating it, but like you've seen that and like you're not getting that same level of roster management at the MAC. Like you got some programs that are going to invest all of that 20 some odd $1 million in in-house NIL money towards their football team. Like Bowling Green, like you could, I guarantee, I'm not going to say I guarantee you, but I feel like between the 12 teams in the MAC, well, maybe not. They're probably only going to be for the football program, only like 3 to 4 million a piece. So we're talking like the gap between the haves and the have-nots just rising exponentially. And if you're a coach who has designs on being a head coach at the powerful four level, do you like what's your path to achieving that through the group of five at this point?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to get yourself to the power four and stay at the power four because that's where you're going to get the jobs from now.
And then it's reverse that you just talked about. Getting yourself from the MAC as a head coach to a Power 4 head coach when they've said for years now, in order for Jason Candle to get a shot, he would have to leave as a head coach to become an offensive coordinator to then do well and get a shot as head coach.
And
in
maybe
P4.
that's the path now. Maybe that's the path now. Maybe you're going from position coach to G5 head coach to Power 4 offensive or defensive coordinator to then Power 4 head coach. Because then it's you can say like, well, I've run my program, my own program before, and I just came from Ole Miss where we did X, Y, and Z with our NIL and whatever, and I have this experience, yada yada yada. But yeah, man, it's certainly a lot different than it was 15 years ago.
But then do you end up, it's not the same path, kind of, a little bit. Do you end up on the same path as Kurt Signetti, though, right? Like, he gets his Power 4 job in Indiana, but he's what, in his 60s?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
He's happy where he is, and Alabama and them aren't going to come calling for a 60-year-old guy to come be their head coach when youth is what we want. Like, and not youth from a standpoint of 25 when you're Kenny Dillingham, but 40s. I think most places would like you to be low 40s. Young 40s when you start, and the hope that they can keep you 10 years if coaches can even survive that long in one place now. I mean, we brought up, gosh, I don't know what episode it was in January, but there might have been during the playoff run about how Kirby Smart considered retirement just a few years ago. The amount of stress on these guys is an all-time high, and maybe it gets reduced a little bit once NIL gets some guardrails on it here in the next year or two, but I don't know. It's an interesting path to get to all these. And, Ryan, I think since we just talked about BG and then OU, we might as well start with the coordinator talk and the guys we have our eyes on since we're already here.
Yeah, we can do that.
So, guys, how we did this episode with the coaching carousel, obviously there's been a lot of change in the offseason, as there always is, but there's been I feel like some intriguing changes between staffs of Ohio State to Penn State, Penn State to Notre Dame. And I feel like we haven't seen that as much, and it's something that's maybe becoming more prevalent as we go through. So Ryan and I, we made up a list of the coordinator changes. Real quick, we'll break down the ones that I did not find. Now, these are head coach or OCDC. I didn't go all the way through to give you the wide receiver coaches and things like that. But the schools that didn't have the big coordinator changes are Illinois, USC, Indiana, Iowa, Oregon, Michigan State, and Northwestern. They all had none. There might have been Tino Sunseri left. Obviously, we'll get to that in a minute, but he wasn't the full OC. There was another OC there with Indiana. So the remaining, including Notre Dame, we went through and added what they changed, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about tonight. So, Ryan, we each have 3 that we have our eyes on the most. Why don't you kick us off tonight with your first OC, DC, potential HC, if you're looking at Purdue, that you have your eyeballs on?
Is it Homer to say Chris Ash? I feel like it's Homer to say Chris Ash.
Nope.
I think it's probably a little Homer.
Because it's an intriguing ad, man. Like, you guys just lost Al Golden, former Cincinnati Bengals linebackers coach, comes to you. You put on elite defenses year after year that he's there, and now he pieces out, and you're bringing back a former defensive coordinator who's pretty proven.
Yeah,
I don't think it's Homer of you.
I guess you also have now, this was pretty, I don't remember when it actually dropped, but Broyles award winner, Al Golden. So the top assistant coach in college football last year. And I mean, arguably the reason that Notre Dame made the run that it did was the way that he was able to get that defense to play. Now, obviously you have to have good assistant coaches to help execute your plan as well, but I mean, they've gotten better each of the 3 years that he's there. We're talking about a long line of incredible defense at Notre Dame dating back to 2017 with Mike Elko. Like, this last defense was probably the best of the bunch, and we're talking about coordinators who are now head coaches at Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and Notre Dame. So that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive, the run that he just had at Notre Dame as defensive coordinator. And with Chris Ash, I mean, it feels a little Al Golden-ish in terms of what his career path has been. Now, I don't think it's a hot take to say that he never had the head coaching success that Al Golden had, because he had 3 years at Rutgers and they were awful. And I don't think I don't know that that's necessarily an indictment on him, because Rutgers has been god awful under everyone not named Greg Schiano, and even then, they're still a 500 team, and we're talking about that like it's God's gift to man or something like that, man. That's a tough job to win at. And I think the thing that concerns me with Ash is the same thing that concerned me with Al Golden, is it's been a while since he's called a defense. Not as long as Al Golden, who I think was like 20 years from the time that he was last a defensive coordinator prior to when he started at Notre Dame in 2022. Chris Ash was, I think, at Texas as their defensive coordinator during the COVID year. And then he got fired when Sark got hired and brought in his own new staff. And he's been kind of trolling around the NFL as like a scout analyst position. I don't even think he's been a position coach. So not like the full Al Golden, where he's been in the NFL for almost a decade after the failed Miami coaching fiasco, which again was not his fault either. So maybe there's a little bit of parallel there. But I mean, there's a lot of turnover on this Notre Dame defense heading into this year. Not as much maybe because of some of the young guys that they got to play as the season went along, but you're having to replace 2 All-American defensive tackles. You're having to replace an All-American safety. Feels weird to say out loud, but you almost got a little lucky that Morrison got hurt midseason, and you now know that you have Leonard Moore. So there's ammo there for sure, but their shortcomings last year, I feel like Al Golden did a really good job of kind of masking those, and they got exposed a little bit against Ohio State. And at that point, it was like, okay, well, we have nothing left to throw at them, so we're just going to kind of do whatever we can here. But it's a big ask for him, because like the offense is in a little bit of flux too with the quarterback battle, so you would still like your defense to be able to I hesitate to say win you some games because you'd think the offense will take a step forward in year two under Mike Denbrock next year, but the defense won them some games this year, man, and I don't know that they have, well, they have good players, but it'll be interesting to see how it all meshes together to see if they continue to look as they have the last 5 to 7 years, or if they take a little bit of a step back. And if they take a little bit of a step back with the schedule they have, especially
Yeah.
the first 6 weeks of the season, we could be going into November and Notre Dame's not even a playoff factor.
That would be an interesting way to follow up this year. Listen, you guys can't let Carson Beck beat you. Okay, you gotta nail him twice, even though he wasn't in the playoff game. I think it's an interesting hire. I mean, I know Chris Ash from his time, obviously with Ohio State, part of the 2014 national championship. So he's been there for a natty. He's got that experience. I think you at least have a pretty experienced DC who's had a term as a head coach to take over a defense that's having a lot of change, right, and losing its peak stars. So I I think it's a pretty solid hire for Notre Dame. I'd be interested to see how it goes. Obviously, we know head coaching stops for Ash didn't go well, and I'm not really in particular to know how much his Texas defense went, but he didn't keep the job there, so must not have been great. For me, number one, let's just stay on the Homer track and go Matt Patricia. Some interesting vibes, as there always are in Columbus, with everything that Ohio State does when they hired Matt Patricia. I would say it was probably 50-50, Ryan, on people that liked it and people that didn't like it. And,
I can tell you, Clinton, that Michigan fans loved it.
well, it was vice versa, right? When Ohio State fans loved Wink Martindale last year.
Right. That's true. That is
When I saw the post, I'm like, this is the exact same thing. But 12 months later, your rival who won a national championship loses their coordinators because that's what happens when you win national championships, and you replace them. And I think part of the piece and why they hired Patricia, which I don't think we've gotten into on this podcast, is with Brian Hartline, spoiler on the list here as a new coordinator, taking over the full reins as offensive coordinator and going to call plays. Ryan Day probably feels like he's in the CEO role still, but he might have to have his hand in to guide Hartline maybe a little more than he did last year when he had Chip Kelly. So instead of just promoting Guerreri and Walton, Guerreri more so, to the lead DC role and having another young guy, he went out and got a guy that has a ton of experience as defensive coordinator. He was with the Patriots from 2012 to 2017. He has 2 Super Bowls with the Patriots, 3 AFC championships. Obviously, coached with legendary coach Bill Belichick, who some people, that was their worry, right? Because he spent so much time with Belichick, and Belichick, I believe, is a defensive mind himself. And how much did that assist Matt Patricia? Did Matt Patricia really get into this himself? He's on the team that has Tom Brady. Well, folks, we just saw this year when one part of your team doesn't work very well, you still get your ass kicked in the Super Bowl. Just ask Patrick Mahomes. So I did some digging. You know, he had 6 seasons in the college ranks, but the last time that was, Ryan, 2001 to 2003. We were I was 11 years old when he was with Syracuse. His last year with Syracuse before he kind of put himself in the NFL and worked himself up to the Patriots defensive coordinator. After his stint with the Patriots DC, he then took the Lions head coaching job from 2018 to 2020, which did not go well, and it actually ended in him calling offensive plays for them in the last year that he was there. And then he kind of bounced around and took the most recent thing was a defensive analyst position with the Eagles. And when they fired their DC mid to late season, he then finished calling plays, which then a lot of people were, well, the Eagles defense sucked when he did it. Like, you can't really put that on the guy, right? Like, he's just stepping in, trying to help. They made some slight improvements when he got in there, but I'm still kind of 50-50 on this hire. I'm not quite sure how to feel in a recruiting game, right? Is Day playing the same game that he played with like a Jim Knowles and a Chip Kelly, that these are more your closers. Your coordinators are your closers, and you're going to let Tim Walton, Guerreri, Larry Johnson, while he's still there, and James Laurinaitis go be your premier recruiters. And then when you need a finisher, Matt Patricia walks in and puts 2 Super Bowl rings on your table when he visits you. or he puts 2 Super Bowl rings on the table when you come see him in Columbus. And that's kind of what Knowles did, right? Minus the Super Bowl rings. He was the closer. He'd come in, talk to you. He wasn't the big recruiter. It was kind of the same thing with Chip Kelly. So I think Day was looking for something with stability on the defense, as he might have to potentially lean in just to help a little bit with the offense this year. But I think I'm the same as Columbus. I'm kind of 50-50 on the hire, and interested to see how it happens, especially like Notre Dame with a ton of turnover. But also, Ohio State did a good job getting a lot of players playing time this year. So we'll see what Matt Patricia brings to the Buckeyes. Any thoughts for you, Ryan, on Matt Patricia?
Well, Clinton, as my old adage goes, the NFL to college coordinator pipeline goes one of two ways. Either it's a swimming success or it bombs out spectacularly. And this feels like the type of hire that's going to do one of those two things and nothing in between.
Well, it certainly helps when Caleb Downs sits on your defense.
Yeah, I think the fascinating subplot to it is like everything that they lost from last year's team. So not only is it a new scheme, but you're having to do it with younger players and not as much of a veteran presence, which maybe can be a good thing, right? Like everyone's on the same page. You don't have to worry about, we talked last week about a lot of times in spring ball, you're giving your older guys some time off, time to rest. You don't need to see the reps from them. But when they're learning a new scheme, maybe you want them out there. And, well, we don't have as many of them because they just all graduated and went to the NFL. So maybe that works out in Ohio State's favor. But I can tell you when that hire happened, one of my coworkers who's a big Michigan fan, I heard the cackling coming from his desk.
Because he was a Lion. He's also a Lions fan, I assume.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. That's head coach, not DC. Difference, right? We see that not work all the time.
Well, I think the thing is not just that he was a bad head coach, but that he was kind of just a shitbag human being when he was in Detroit, and just nobody liked him.
Yep.
Which is,
I've heard that. There's been some interviews, I believe, that have popped up with Patricia on NFL Network that he has come out and said he is aware of that. And those comments, and he has essentially been doing some self-work to help improve upon that. This is not a long-term thing, right? Like, this is a stepping stone.
Oh, no,
like
he's
Chip Kelly was.
Yeah.
It's 1 to 2 years. If he hits well, he's gone. I would say even if he hits well in year 1, he's gone.
Yeah, he's going back to the NFL.
And then get in a position there. Or if year 1 goes horribly, he will be fired. And he will not be going back to the NFL. And then Ohio State will promote Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton, the defensive coordinator, like we all thought they were going to. There's no secret who the next 2 up are, or at least the next one that is up after Matt Patricia. It's just a matter of time if he's here for 1 or 2 years. I think Day originally thought he was going to get 2 with Kelly. He got 1 because Chip Kelly got $6 million to go be the offensive coordinator for the Oakland Raiders. I'd take $6 million to go be OC for a dumpster fire too. But all right, Ryan, number 2, who you got for me?
I have the guy who's also going to be in the coaching box with him, Brian Hartline, and you kind of touched on the reasons why I think this is fascinating, because he's been their offensive coordinator technically, or has carried that title for what now? 3 years, 4 years?
3 years. I think 3. Yep.
So they're finally giving him
the full reins.
We're taking the training wheels off, buddy, go out there. And I feel like, and I mean, maybe it's something similar because Day and Hartline have worked together for so long, so in theory they should have a good rapport. But I think the reason why the Chip Kelly and Ryan Day marriage worked so well is, 1, the long-term trust that was there, but also 2, the experience, the plethora of play calling experience that Chip Kelly had going back decades, right? We're not talking about a first-time play caller that...
May I interject once? There was no plethora of play calling in that Michigan game, though. Just going to say.
There was not. I don't know if there was like a monkey banging the cymbals together on the headsets there, or what was going on, but...
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that was something. But yeah, so that, like, what was Ryan Day's stated goal coming in to this past season? It was, I want to be more of a CEO. I'm giving up play calling duties. I'm disengaging from this. I want to be more of like the overall present coach. Is he going to be able to do that with a first-time play caller? Or is there going to be a situation where the first time they play a team with a pulse this year, it's looking a little Michigan-y out there, and it's 7-3 at halftime. And does Ryan Day start to get itchy trigger finger? Just be like, you know what, Brian, I think you need to call a little bit more of this in the second half, or just we're gonna run this here, or yeah. So I'm curious to see how that goes because I don't know, like Brian Hartline's career arc has been fascinating because he could probably have been a head coach by now if he wanted to. Like I know he interviewed
Not
for
even to the
Cincinnati.
MAC route, right?
No, I think he interviewed for Cincinnati a couple years ago, or they expressed interest in interviewing him when they hired Satterfield. So
He interviewed at West Virginia this past year too.
he has had opportunities, and now he's getting a chance. Like he's finally like no longer OC in name only. He's finally getting that responsibility. And if you're one of the conspiracy theorists that believes that this is setting him up to ascend to Ryan Day's job when he eventually leaves for the NFL, then you kind of got to knock this out of the park, man. You can't kind of flubber this opportunity, or else they're going to be like, look, thanks for all your service, but we're going elsewhere. We don't think you have the goods for it.
Yeah. I think you are on par with there could be some scenarios in a time where Day's going to get that itchy finger to try to step in. You buy yourself a ton of goodwill by winning a national championship and getting people off your back. I think Hartline, there was an interview done with Hartline and then multiple done with Ryan Day after the national championship and once they promoted Hartline to his confidence level. And at least in speaking to the interviews, Ryan Day seems 100% confident in Brian Hartline's ability to call these plays. Now, it's easier said than done than when you have to do it in a game, right? And week 1 is Texas in the Horseshoe. So you're not getting Marshall or Akron week 1. It's Texas. Who's going to want revenge on you? Nothing better than to beat you in your home stadium week 1 for Texas there. I hear time and time again, though, that Hartline has an innovative mind. He's obviously got experience, a ton of experience under Ryan Day. I believe he had 1 year with Urban Meyer and now has time under Chip Kelly. So he's learned a lot. Now it's time to apply it. And hopefully this does not come to the old saying of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Hopefully he can drink from that pool pretty well there and isn't force-fed the water or spoon-fed it to help himself out. But I love the hire with Hartline. I certainly think it's a move that was in the works to be made. And Day expected, like I said, 2 years with Kelly and then to make this move. So maybe a year sooner than what they thought. But it's here now, and we're going to see what happens. The one intriguing thing is we mentioned spring. Spring is changing. We talked about this last week. Without you having a normal, typical spring and a normal, typical spring game, whatever you want to call it, or what leads up to it, how does that affect Brian Hartline and adjusting to a play calling scenario? I don't know how much that affects him. We'll see as we break into spring and how all these teams handle this stuff. Number 2, for me, which one do I want to go with? I'm going to go to Purdue / now Washington. Ryan Walters, former Purdue head coach, who was canned this past offseason. He was head coach of Purdue for 2022 through 2024. As Clinton predicted, a 1-win season for the Boilermakers got him fired. He was Illinois' defensive coordinator for 2 seasons. Following the 2020 season in which the Illini ranked 97th nationally in scoring defense, Ryan, which is 34.9 points per game, and 114th in yards allowed, 466.8. Ryan Walters' first year in Champaign, they saw a rise to 29th in scoring defense, 21.9, and then 49th in yards per game at 367, so quite an improvement. And then we know the 2022 defense was elite, right? They were one step away, one bad play call maybe away from knocking off Michigan that year in the Big House. But in 2022, they went into the bowl schedule, number 1 nationally, Ryan, in scoring defense at 12.3 points per game. Now, I know that's against the Big Ten West, but number 2 in yards allowed per game at 263.8. So Ryan Walters is back in what we want to call his wheelhouse. Certainly calling plays last year for Purdue was not in his wheelhouse, maybe nor was a head coach. Purdue can be a tough spot. There have been coaches who have success, but also many that have not. So I'm interested to see how Ryan Walters comes in, kind of helps revamp, move forward with this Washington defense. Washington on the whole last year was just kind of inconsistent. We know that, both offensively and defensively. But you have a steady hand now to lead your defense, and I think that's a huge help to a Huskies team who's going to be breaking in a new quarterback in Damon Jackson this year.
Damon Williams.
Damon Williams. Good Lord. Come on, Clinton. See, my brain's been in combine mode.
Brother.
I'm stuck on all these guys that are leaving versus these guys that are coming in. That's the second misspeak I've had tonight. Ryan, you any thoughts on your counterpart Ryan going to Washington?
No, I mean I have been on the record saying that if you're going to pick one team to do the Phoenix Act this year, go from ashes to playoff contender in the Big Ten, I would pick Washington. They certainly have, at least offensively, the skill position guys in place. We haven't really done a deep dive on their defense yet to know what they have coming back. But, I mean, there was a tough build last year. And all things considered, I don't think Jed Fish did a poor job. Maybe if you're factoring in the fact that a couple of their losses were due to poor discipline and just brain-dead mistakes, maybe that knocks you down a peg or two on the grade scale. But a full offseason with the team, a chance to continue building that roster. I'm fascinated to see what that turns into for the Huskies in year 2.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan, number 3 for you.
Number 3. Well, before I do number 3,
I was gonna say, can I guess?
Sure.
I think I got yours.
Okay.
I think you're going up to Wisconsin and going with Jeff Grimes, the offensive
You
coordinator.
motherfucker.
I know you because you've loved talking about the dairy rate.
Yeah.
Commenting about the success of that. So.
Well, I wanted to go a couple honorable mentions here because this was very hard to parse this down to 3. I think it's laughable that we're going to go through this entire thing and not even mention Jim Knowles, who might have more pressure on him than any coordinator in the country next
Part of the
year.
reason I didn't pick Knowles is because we kind of hashed it pretty good in one of our episodes in January. We spent 15 minutes talking about him, so
That's fair.
I felt like we kind of already went there. So if you guys want to, go back and check that out.
But yeah, more arguably pressure on him than any coordinator in the country, given the expectations surrounding Penn State this year. Danny Collins at Minnesota, it is now the 3rd straight season PJ Fleck is having to replace a defensive coordinator after Corey Heatherman went to Miami. And Minnesota's defense was really good last year, and I think there's some expectations that they take another step forward this year, and his ability to carry through that defensive aptitude that they've had in the last couple of years will be a big key in that. And then Chip Lindsey at Michigan. It's no secret that Michigan's offense was a train wreck this year for a multitude of reasons, and you can put a lot of that on the quarterback. The play calling probably didn't do them a whole lot of favors. And they're losing some guys on that offense too, man. Like, no more Edwards and Mullings. You're losing what?
I said Michigan's offense was booty hole, and then I instantly went, Michigan's offense was a chocolate starfish.
All right, you should have just said the chocolate starfish. Oh, brother.
We're the biggest Limp Bizkit fans left in the world. Does anyone even play their music anymore?
Listen, I spent all day yesterday playing NHL Hits 2003, and there was some Limp Bizkit on there.
There you go.
That's where the Rolling song came from.
That's right.
I think. Maybe that it was 2000. I don't know. Anyway, so, I mean, you paid a shitload of money to get your quarterback. You didn't really fix the receiver position all that well. You're losing your top 2 running backs, and I mean, Jordan Marshall looked good in the bowl game, but I mean, you're having to replace that as well. You're having to replace your tight end. That's still going to be a tough build. So fascinated to see how that turns out, but I went with Grimes because his ability to get off Wisconsin's offense off the mat is probably going to be paramount in whether or not Luke Fickell is coaching another year at Wisconsin in 2026.
But wait, Ryan, he got an extension through 2032.
I don't understand that at all. That felt like a why, like I mean, I get why they did it because you're probably trying to quiet some of the is Luke Fickell on the hot seat talk. And did you find any details on the buyout? I think someone tweeted at us that it went up, but I don't know that that's actually confirmed.
No, I'm not for sure.
So if the buyout didn't change, it doesn't really mean anything. If the buyout did change, then maybe it means something. But also, these teams are raking in more money than they know what to do with. So maybe
Hmm.
that doesn't act, another $10 million is whatever at that point for them. But I so Grimes replaced Andy Kotelnicki at Kansas, and I thought that was a weird hire because he got fired at Baylor the year before in
Hmm.
his most recent stop. And if you flash back to early in, there was a lot of expectations on Kansas heading into last year with Jalen Daniels coming back and Devin Neal in the backfield. And they kind of sucked for the first half of the year.
Hmm.
So we're sitting there like, oh, why did they bring in Jeff Grimes? But they got better as the season went along. They were one of the hottest teams in the country over the second half of the season.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, one
ended
could
up,
argue, Ryan, in the Big 12, if they'd have played that way all year, they were going to win the Big 12 championship.
oh, for sure, for sure, for sure. They ran the ball well, 5.5 yards a carry, 210 rushing yards a game. They still ended up averaging 30 points a game despite the way they started the season.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's a fascinating hire. And I mean, certainly makes a lot more sense hiring him now than it did Kansas hiring him a year ago. But you you have to, if you're Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, you have to establish an identity.
Hmm.
It doesn't necessarily, I mean, it should be pound the football, rely on those big Wisconsin offensive linemen, have a strong running game, but you also can't forsake the forward pass and just do a Navy Army triple option thing. It has to be a modern version of that. And if it's what Jeff Grimes was able to get the second half of the season out of Kansas last year, then that could be a fun Wisconsin offense eventually. I'm sure it's probably not going to come out looking great. I mean, Wisconsin's got a tough start to their season too, but
Brutal again.
I think it's one of those things that if bare minimum, if you can establish, you have an identity, an identifiable identity. That sounds ridiculous to say back to back, but we're not sitting here at the end of the season next year being like, what the hell is Wisconsin trying to do on offense? Like, we can identify what they're doing. They're getting better at doing it.
Hmm.
And then you go into 2026 saying, all right, we're where we need to be now. Then I think you can classify that as a win, irrespective of wins and losses. Because again, it's a tough schedule for Wisconsin, and I'm not going to sit here and be like they need to go 8-4 for this to be a successful season and Luke Fickell to save his job. And I think people, maybe, and if Wisconsin fans are listening, they can tell me I'm wrong, but I think the decision makers there probably have a similar mindset to that too. That you can't just be firing coaches every 3 years because it's not like you're Ohio State and it's a desirable job that everyone wants. I'm sure there's a ton of people who would love to work at Wisconsin, but you need to reverse what has been going wrong there the last 5 years to make that a highly desirable Big Ten job again and differentiate it from the rest of the middle of the pack of that conference.
Well, the other thing, too, is this isn't the Big 10 West anymore.
Nope.
You're getting shots at everybody. You don't get the chance. If I think one could argue if Luke Fickell comes into the Big 10 that wasn't going to change, then maybe he has a little better luck. I mean, he's still getting Alabama in the out of conference. That's not promising. But you mentioned the 2026 schedule, and it gets me thinking, can you just survive this year and look improved enough? I mean, before we mentioned the 26 schedule, you talked about Grimes. I mean, they averaged 29.7 points per game, which you mentioned. 420 yards a game, Ryan. They were third in the NCAA on third down. I don't know what Wisconsin was last year, but it sure as hell wasn't as good as that. They converted 51%. And then in reading some more about Grimes, they say his offense just lines up a little more with the Wisconsin classic approach versus the Longo Dairy raid that you like to call it. So I'm excited to see what they have. But looking at the 2026 schedule, if we can survive this year with the Badgers and Luke Fickell get through this, you're against Notre Dame at Lambeau Field to start
Oh,
2026.
I forgot that that's a thing.
Maybe we need to make that the ITP travel game for that year.
Yeah, but that's not going to a
I
college
know it's not
campus.
a college one, but then you get the Leathernecks of Western Illinois. You get the Pitt Panthers in Camp Randall. You got to go to Iowa, but you got to play that every year. At Maryland, at Penn State, at Purdue, at UCLA, Michigan State, Minnesota, Rutgers, USC. Doesn't sound that daunting.
Oh, it's not too bad.
At Penn State and versus Notre Dame.
Well, and you got to think too. That's going to be a Penn State team that is
Depleted.
the year at. It's the
They're going to be
Michigan
the Michigan, Ohio
2024,
State.
Ohio State
Yeah,
2025 when
yeah.
everyone leaves because
They're going
they
to be
took their
depleted.
run.
Absolutely. So Fickle just needs to survive. Grimes, I mean, any success, any progress is success. Can you keep the quarterback healthy? Back to back years, right? Like, I think that's the other thing that Fickle can hang on to is like, I had to come in here. My quarterback transfers to Florida. We bring in two new guys, Mordecai and then Van Dyke. Injuries plagued them, Van Dyke, for the entire season. And so now they get a chance. And can they hold on to something here and build on it? We'll have to see. But I would like to see Wisconsin get back to at least 8 wins. I don't know if it's possible, but it feels weird to not have Wisconsin in the mix. And again, that's the change that the Big Ten West is no longer there. That crutch is gone. You have to compete and swing with the big boys every single week now. And that's a hard thing for some of these teams to adjust to. It's going to be hard for Iowa, too, as they go. And then we'll see how they continue to develop their offense. I did have one honorable mention as well. Mine was going to be Purdue's. I did. Obviously, they got new OCs and DCs. I just went head coach on our sheet. Barry Odom led UNLV to some big stuff, consecutive MWC conference championship appearances. He helped them reach double-digit wins for only the third time in team history. So Purdue brings in a fairly proven winner here. He's already been head coach at Missouri prior to head coach for UNLV. So let's see if we can build a little bit on kind of the momentum Jeff Brom had and get away from what Ryan Walters kind of struggled with. My third and final is the brand new, kind of new, offensive coordinator for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and that's Dana Holgorsen, formerly head coach of West Virginia and Houston. They brought him in 2024 as an offensive analyst. I believe by the end of the year, I would assume he might have been calling plays to an extent there or having a major input with those play calls. He's on a 2-year deal as offensive coordinator. And Ryan, if there's one thing you can remember about Mr. Holgorsen, he has a history of high-scoring offenses. In 6 seasons as an FBS coordinator, his offenses have had an average national finish of 2nd in passing offense, 3rd in total offense, and 6th in scoring offense. All 6 of the offenses that he has coordinated have ranked in the top 3 nationally in passing, top 6 in total offense, and top 13 in scoring offense. So the expectations, again, we're climbing that roller coaster. Think about Millennium Force. You ever rode the Millennium Force, Ryan? You're climbing up. Let's hope there's not that dip when the season kicks off this year. And it wasn't quite a dip right away last year for Nebraska, but he's got a hell of a weapon in Dylan Raiola. You've alluded to in previous episodes about some of the weapons they brought Raiola in this year. I expect them to be more consistently explosive on offense this year with Holgorsen at the helm. Being a former head coach, again, that's kind of like not quite the Day Kelly scenario, being in regards that they had that former relationship. But Matt Rule can just be the CEO and let Dana Holgorsen handle the offense. He doesn't need to stick his nose in there and have too much input. So I really love this hire for the Cornhuskers. I think it's going to do wonders for their offense. We're now in year 3 of Rule. We know the rule of thumb with Matt Rule is that you improve every year, and by year 3, it's pretty substantial. And Nebraska was kind of one of the teams I mentioned that could be not necessarily your Phoenix example there, but another team that kind of pops up and lives more to the expectations that we might have put on them too early last year. Any thoughts on Holgorsen, Ryan?
No, I don't think that Nebraska is necessarily even close to the same pressure level as going to be felt at Wisconsin this year, but they hit the goal last year. They got the bowl game. As ugly as it was to get there, they got the bowl game. So now that you've gotten that off your back, now the fans are not just going to be satisfied with, oh, boys, 6-6, here we go again. Like, you have the 5-star quarterback. You're surrounding him with talent. It's time to start unleashing that a little bit. Like, I think now Nebraska fans, again, Broadcast Rob, if you're listening, let me know if I'm wrong here. But I think they're going to be getting to a point this year where they're expecting to not necessarily compete for the Big Ten, but see the roadmap where in 2026 you feel confident going into that year that, like, yes, we have the right people in place. The quarterback took a huge step forward, and we really think that he can ascend to a Heisman campaign in 26. Like, I think that's what you want to see if you're a Nebraska fan this year. So big hire. I thought he did well last year. So interested to see how that ascends with a full offseason to kind of implement his whole offense into the Matt Rule scheme.
And you think about it, again, you're going to have to play defense by putting up some money to keep Dylan Raiola around. If he has a big year under Holgorsen, you know schools like Georgia are going to be calling. It's certainly going to happen. Clemson's going to be without Cade Klubnik after this year. Like, I don't know if Dabo Swinney might be the team that's tampering, but examples of quarterbacks that will be gone. We know everybody's calling. Carson Beck was supposedly to the NFL till Miami fizzled out some big money. So guess who's going to have an opening next year? The Miami Hurricanes. They've proven they don't develop quarterbacks. They'll just buy them. So we'll see what happens there. All right, so to kind of wrap us up, we tackled the Ohio State coordinating hires. We did the Jim Knowles. Obviously a big deal there between Penn State, Ohio State. But again, you guys go back and listen to the previous episode that we talked about Knowles at length there. Notre Dame's getting Chris Ash, Holgorsen to Nebraska. The other coordinating hire for Washington is Jimmy Doherty, however you're going to say his last name there. He is a passing game coordinator in 2024, and he will also be staying as the quarterback's coach as he calls plays. We covered Danny Collins at Minnesota, Barry Odom for Purdue as head coach, Jeff Grimes, OC, Wisconsin. Now to the UCLA Bruins. Tino Sunseri coming away from Indiana to replace Eric Bieniemy. He was co-OC for Indiana, as we mentioned earlier, in 2024. Maryland has hired Pep Hamilton as their offensive coordinator. If you guys remember the name, he's been more of a name that's been around NFL circles, most recently Texans OC in 2022, and he's been an OC for 3 different franchises in the NFL. So he's supposedly a premier quarterback developer. So we'll see how that happens this year. Ryan covered Mr. Chip Lindsey as offensive coordinator at Michigan. And the last 2 that we did not mention is Rutgers has changes at defensive coordinator. That would be Rob Smith and Zach Sparber coming in to do co-DC. This is actually Smith's 3rd stint in Piscataway. And then we have Sparber, coach linebackers at JMU in 2024, and now comes up to the Scarlet Knights. Any final thoughts, Ryan, before we get into a quick little combine recap here?
No, I think we got everything I wanted to touch on.
Good, excellent. I think we did great there. So, Ryan, can you hit that lovely sound for me?
Oh, balls. I was not ready for that at all.
All right, folks, we got a little post-combine stock report here. Obviously, we could spend all day going through every single person that we listed on our sheet to follow, so I decided to go through. I have 4 guys who I kind of noted their stock up post-combine. I put 3 guys as their stock down post-combine, and I have a I don't know what to do with you guy. So we're going to start with the stock up. Ariante Ursary. As I tweeted out earlier, he's the offensive tackle for Minnesota. Heading into the combine, he was viewed as a fringe first round. And if we go all the way back to the beginning of 2024, he was ranked 25th. And Ryan, I don't know if you checked this out or not, but he was ranked 25th on Bruce Feldman's annual freak list prior to the 2024 season. So Feldman was trying to make us aware of this guy before we got even to this combine portion. Ryan, he is 6'6", 330 pounds. He ran a 40-yard dash in 5 seconds.
That's pretty impressive.
I don't think...
I can't do that.
I'm sorry, he's at least 6'6", 330 pounds. But I don't know if I could do 5 seconds 10 years ago. But that is that's the fastest mark by an offensive lineman who's at least 6'6", 330 pounds since 2003. Pretty
That's
damn
crazy.
impressive. 21
That's
years.
crazy.
He had a 9'3" broad jump and a 29.5-inch vertical. It's a pretty damn good hop for a gentleman that's massive. His relative athletic score, otherwise known as the ROS, was a 9.9 out of 10. That is phenomenal. And I wanted to do a little deeping because oh my gosh.
Come again?
I wanted to do a little deeper dig. And we know they talk about arm length all the time with linemen going to the NFL. The deemed optimal arm length in the NFL is 33 inches. He clears that at 33.125 inches, so he clears that as well. He has 3 years of impressive production on film. Combined with this athletic testing, my guess, as well as others that I've read, this likely solidifies him as a first-round pick. So what's important about that, Ryan, and my little tidbit that I promised people on Twitter is the Minnesota Golden Gophers have not had a first-round offensive lineman selected since Brian Williams in 1989. That's a long-ass time to go without a first-round offensive lineman selection. And then one of the guys you actually mentioned, Ryan, was defensive tackle C.J. West out of Indiana. Pre-combine, he was a day 3 projection for most things that I read. He shows up to the combine. He's another big boy, 316 pounds, runs a 4.95 40 time, Ryan. He had a vertical jump of 33 inches. These massive humans are jumping out the building, man. And then reading about him, he displays adequate hand and foot quickness on film, and you kind of get to see that a little bit when they do the combine workouts. He shows speed, explosive energy. My question is, can his combine and maybe his pro day, when he shows up for Indiana there, get him into day 2 instead of being in the day 3 projection? He was kind of a sleeper, and I don't know really. People are going to notice more with him now, so I'm not sure by time draft time he's going to be a sleeper. Another name we're extremely familiar with is half of the Ohio State tandem, Quinshon Judkins, put on a show at the NFL Combine. 5'11", 221 pounds, 4.48 40-yard dash. He went over 11 feet on a broad jump. Ryan, I don't know the last time you did a broad jump, but 11 feet is pretty damn far, my man.
Very far.
38.5-inch vertical jump, a 9.88 RAS. So he's coming off 1,060 yards on 94 carries, 14 TDs, and average 5.5 yards per carry. Judkins brings power and physicality when he runs the ball. He's not afraid to hit anybody. But he's also shown the ability that he can be a lead back in Ole Miss's offense and be able to split the load and be just as productive with Travion Henderson this past year. Day 2 projection still at the Combine, most likely a pretty firm second-round pick now. OSU Pro Day is March 26th if Judkins decides there's anything else he needs to improve upon. And the last stock riser is former Michigan State Spartan and now former Oregon Duck, Derek Harmon. Nice combine for him. He sits at 6'4", 313 pounds. Big boy. He had a 1.74 second 10-yard split, Ryan. That's pretty quick for a man that's big.
Mm-hmm.
Big. Long arms. The NFL scouts noted exceptional size, length, and strength, as well as the versatility to play odd or even fronts, which makes him pretty adaptable at the NFL level. Some scouts have even went as far. This is bold. This is not me, guys. I know we don't love the player comps, but has went as far as giving him a Chris Jones comparison. That's a pretty lofty-ass comparison, given that Jones is probably the best defensive tackle in football. But with this combine and Harmon's film over the past year, he may very well be the first defensive tackle off the board, trumping Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. So that'll be a fun one to be able to watch. Of course, Graham and Grant will do a little more at Michigan's Pro Day. Stock down will be a little quicker here. Jamari Caldwell, I mentioned him as an eyes that I had on coming into the combine. Pretty mediocre combine performance overall. They say mediocre 40 in vertical jump, but again, how fast do we expect these guys to run when they're that big? Final combine score of a 6.19, and that is good enough to say good backup potential, maybe a starter. Tez Johnson. This is probably one of my biggest ones here. Ryan, I texted you about this. Measured in at 5'9" and a whopping 154 pounds. The other thing in his interviews, he said, "You guys better not blink or you're going to miss my 40 because he's going to run it so fast." Well, watching this, I blinked twice and he was still running. So certainly didn't go too well for him. He's getting knocked tremendously, 4.55, 4.51 in the 40. That is, I believe, the slowest time ever recorded for a player that weighs under 170 pounds. Now the last one. An Iowa guy we love, Jay Higgins, who was an absolute stud this past year for the Hawkeyes. I believe 124 tackles on the season, I believe. Coming into the combine, there was a lot of concern on his lack of size and athleticism. 6 foot, 231 pounds. Well, this was confirmed at the combine, Ryan. He had the lowest combined IQ athleticism score among the linebackers by nearly 10 points, with a mark of 52. Also, while clocking a 4.82 40-yard dash, which was the slowest time of the position group. He was getting some maybe pushing round 2 projection potentially. People were saying round 3 most likely, and now he might not even be a round 3 pick. Might be later. Trust the tape, though, guys. He plays very well on tape. And one we know very well, Ryan, that I think you can put your input in on this one is the I don't know what to do with you, Donovan Edwards. He had a ROS of 9.6, which is stellar. Again, this is out of 10. He put up 23 bench press reps, which led all running backs, demonstrating the strength that he has. A 1.51 second 10-yard split, also great. 4.45 40. Here's the question, right? He shows up when the lights shine the brightest. Demonstrated perfectly by putting on a show at the Combine, putting on a show against Washington, against Ohio State, but no week-to-week consistency. We talked about this all year. We talked about it this year, relegating to last year. He shows up, and then he's non-existent. I feel like he needs a team or a coach that can find a way to get him to show up weekly and utilize his athletic ability so that we also just don't require him to be the lead guy. Is that part of the problem? So we try to turn to him as the lead guys when he disappears? I don't know. So he was my IDK what to do with you at the NFL Combine. Any thoughts on Big Don, Ryan?
No. No, I don't know. I think growing up, I always kind of rolled my eyes whenever you'd hear like the anonymous coach or scout comments like he doesn't love football enough. It's like, okay, well, whatever. It's just one thing. But I think like I get the merit to it where it's like you have some guys who just don't love football. They view it as a job, and how maniacal are they going to be about their preparation and their consistency? Not even necessarily like I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go head first into every play and give myself CTE so I can die at 38. Doesn't need to be that, but like with him specifically, I don't know, man. Someone will probably talk themselves into taking him early day 3 because of the athletic profile, and maybe he has a big game every now and then, but I just have not seen it with him. And I mean, we talked about it heading into last year. I'm like, you guys really think this guy's going to be the best running back in college football?
Yeah.
No, we know the skill set's there. I mean, he was a 5-star. He was it's very, because like my one rant always about the recruiting rankings is when they rate you out of high school, it's not how good of a football player you are, it's what your athletic profile is, because they're trying to project you to the NFL draft. And to be a 5-star as a running back, you have to be a freak, because running backs just are not drafted in the first round unless they are freaks. So we always knew the athleticism was there, but people are going to watch the tape and they'll see, oh, wow, look at that good run. And then they'll watch the middle third of the season when he didn't do fuck all. And they're like, oh, huh,
Yeah.
interesting.
The old saying goes, leopards don't change their spots. So we'll see what Donovan can do. I think an interesting landing spot for him could be with the Chargers and reuniting with Jim Harbaugh. They have a running back need. They'll probably likely re-sign J.K. Dobbins would be my guess, but then to bring in and pair Donovan Edwards with him could be an interesting backfield. All right, guys, that kind of ends the Combine stuff. Looking ahead at the schedule, we are off until next Monday. We have a couple more where we're once a week before we dive into the spring episodes. I believe we are fully locked in now with April 17th. Draft guy Jared will rejoin us for a draft episode. And then we will have another draft episode on April 21st, which is a Monday. And we will be joined by, I don't want to botch his name because I'm having name problems today, Ryan Roberts, who will come on and join us. And we're going to talk a little more skill positions. We're going to stay in Jared's wheelhouse this year, I believe, and talk more just D-line, O-line with him. But we're looking to start Big Ten previews, spring previews on March 24th. But next week, Ryan and I are going to be discussing the biggest questions facing each team. Maybe we'll do about 3 to 5 questions per person instead of each team, so we can get you out of here before 5 hours, heading into the spring, and then talk FanDuel's odds to win the Big Ten championship for 2025.
I love gambling.
That's why I put that one in there for you.
I
Ron.
don't love gambling. I have not. I'm trying to rebuild a balance for March Madness, and it's not going well.
Yeah. We got to figure out a name for our segment that we're going to have this year for Ryan's Bets of the Week or something like that. And he's going to tell you what you should lock up and what you shouldn't.
Yeah, we'll call it. Would you like to lose some money? Listen to Ryan.
Losing your ass.
You might as well just Venmo Ryan $10 because you're not getting any return on this investment. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us once again this evening. We'll be back with you guys next Monday, March 10th. Same time, same band channel. Stay warm.
See you. Dude, I got to piss. Oh, my golly gee. All right, that was much